over to the Executive Director of the Center for Civic Engagement, Susan Moriarty.
Thank you, Tyler. I want to welcome everyone to the Tennessee YMCA Center for Civic Engagement inaugural showcase. As Tyler said, my name is Susan Moriarty, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Executive Director of the Center for Civic Engagement. Not unlike every other aspect of this year, our 2020 Model United Nations is not one that any of us expected. This year would not have been possible without the support and dedication of the YMCA leadership, volunteers, advisors, officers, and delegates who have been so resilient, flexible, and fully dedicated to making sure that the CCE was able to continue its long history of civic engagement. As I said, this was not our traditional Model UN that we've been hosting for the past 40 years. However, in transitioning to a virtual format, we have found some blessings. This Model UN season, we were able to host 5 virtual conferences with nearly 1,600 middle and high school students from 84 schools, 8 states, and 3 countries, including Oman and the Ukraine. And immediately before this, we hosted our first global forum with our partners in Colombia, where delegates from our Center for Civic Engagement and delegates from the YMCA in Colombia discussed and made recommendations regarding climate change cooperation in the Western Hemisphere. So even though we haven't been at the Embassy Suites in Murfreesboro for the entire month of November, this has still been a very busy and fulfilling month. Now on to the showcase. As Tyler said, an invitation to today's showcase is the highest honor offered at this year's Model UN conferences. The highest 2 ranked resolutions from each of our Model UN conferences have been invited to present today before the joint committee composed of the Outstanding Statesperson winners from each conference. We are so proud of our students who are here today. Before we begin, I'd like to thank our Model UN officers who are going to be chairing today: Solman Kim, Hadia Krieger, Jackson Peden, and Nelson Rose. And now it is my pleasure to turn it over to the officers.
Hi everyone, my name is Jackson Peden. I'm a senior at Brentwood Academy, and I served as a General Assembly liaison at this year's Model United Nations Conference B. I've also been a member of Security Council and also served as just a general delegate, and I'm so honored and excited to be able to chair the showcase for all of you today. I've been a part of this program for the last 4 years, and I've loved every minute of it. And for those of you that still have years to be in conferences, I encourage you to continue to do it because they're amazing.
Hi, my name is Hadia Kruger. I am a senior at Brentwood Academy, and this is my 4th and unfortunately final year at Model UN. I was a General Assembly Vice President this year at Conference B. I've served as a delegate in the past, and I have to say that I agree with Jackson, keep coming back because it's one of the things I will truly miss from high school.
Hi, my name is Nelson Rose. I'm a senior at Brentwood High, and I served as GA president during this year's Conference B. I've served as a General Assembly delegate in the past for 7 years, including middle school. And this is also my final year of Model United Nations, and I envy those of you who have time in the program because it was really something that was valuable to me.
Hi, I'm Solman Kim. I'm a senior at John Overton High School, and I was one of the General Assembly presidents at Conference A. And I'm really excited to hear all of you guys present, and I wish you guys the best of luck. And don't be nervous. I don't think you guys are, because you guys are going to do amazing.
So we're about to start presenting resolutions, but before we do that, I have one quick announcement about intent speakers. So we already have a bunch of intent speakers that have signed up for different resolutions on our docket, but we will let you know if there's an opening for one, and we will solicit a speaker from the floor if there is one. So if you didn't sign up for an intent speech, but you're thinking you might want to give one, those options will arise, and you'll be able to have the option to volunteer for that later when we're soliciting those. That said, we are now ready to start presenting resolutions. So will the patrons of Resolution E3, a resolution to provide medication for HIV-infected pregnant women and delays in medicine transportation due to COVID-19, please prepare to present. Patrons, you'll have 2 minutes for your introduction, and you may begin when ready.
Good afternoon, fellow delegates. I'm sure everyone here has experienced a common viral infection such as the flu. For most of us, we dread the combination of a stuffy nose, sore throat, and headache. Luckily, by the end of a week or two, our bodies recover after fighting the virus. But imagine if this wasn't the case, and that catching something as common as the flu could kill you, your family, and your friends. Countries in sub-Saharan Africa, such as Lesotho, account for nearly 65% of new HIV infections globally. Human immunodeficiency virus, more commonly known as HIV, is a virus that attacks the immune system and leaves the human body defenseless. As a result, one of the few health issues that HIV-positive people face is the higher risk of developing serious flu-related complications, such as pneumonia, that ultimately lead to heart and lung problems.
Lesotho has had a high prevalence rate of 23% since 2005 and the second highest prevalence rate of HIV in the world. Our resolution seeks to provide medication through treatment packages to both pregnant women with HIV and others with HIV who have been unable to receive treatment due to the COVID-19 pandemic. We would provide proper antiretroviral treatment, reducing the current mother-to-child transmission rate from 11% to lower than 5%. Furthermore, since many countries have reported reductions in medicine distribution, the COVID relief program of our resolution will help prevent HIV medication setbacks and continue Lesotho's progress towards reducing their HIV prevalence. Thank you, and we yield the remainder of our time to the summation.
And with that, the patrons have yielded 35 seconds into the summation. We will now move into 2 minutes of technical. Do we have any technical questions on the floor? Field.
Field, Angola. What is the most prevalent disease in your country?
HIV, AIDS, and tuberculosis.
Tuliatis.
Tuliatis, Sri Lanka. Does this provide medication to just women in Lesotho or multiple countries?
So first we're going to be starting off by distributing the packages in Lesotho, and if we have remaining packages, we'll be distributing them to the other countries in sub-Saharan Africa because due to COVID, the whole sub-Saharan African, like all the countries in there, will be affected.
Easter.
Easter, Portugal. How many of these pickup centers will be installed per district?
Depending on the prevalence rate in that area, we'll adjust accordingly.
And each district will be given 10,000 packages.
Abstin, Brazil. At what stage in their pregnancy will women start needing the kits?
Second trimester.
Kramer.
How many people are currently infected with HIV/AIDS?
$330,000 cases.
Richards, Bolivia. What's the accuracy of the HIV test you talked about using in your resolution?
Very accurate. We've been using it in studying stats in other countries who have used the same methods that we have.
Adarsh,
Ecuador. What are the top 5 countries with HIV prevalence?
Lesotho is in the top 5. Right now they're the second, but we don't know about the other countries so far.
Thank you.
And with that, time for this round of technical questions has elapsed. We will now move into con pro debate. But we also have a con and a pro intent speaker. Do we have a motion to recognize those speeches?
Motion.
Please rise and state your motion.
Motion to recognize those intent speeches.
That motion is in order. Do we have a second?
Second.
And we will now move into our first round of intent speeches for a con intent speaker. You may begin when ready.
Fellow delegates and honorable chair, Lesotho is a country with a lot of HIV-related cases, and although this resolution proclaims that they have a solution to this problem, there are many concerns with this proposed resolution. For example, in line 20 to 23, they talk about a proposed plan that is still in progress. The 90-90-90 target goal to get people living with HIV to know their status, get medication, and get their symptoms suppressed through a type of antiretroviral medication. The first target, to get 90% of the population living with HIV to get medication, is already completed. In lines 44 to 45, they want to make it mandatory that a woman be given a test when they are declared to be pregnant. This is unnecessary because 90% of the people already know their status through the 99 target, as previously mentioned. Thus, giving even more blood tests to those who already know their status is a waste of time and resources of the UN because they ask for a yearly sum of around 9 million. In the 90-90-90 target, the second and third targets of implementing treatment have still not been met due to the negative viewpoints of the patients that harbor toward the medication. Lesotho wishes to give people medication if they find that they were positive for HIV. This is also likely to fail as seen in the 90-90 target goal. Furthermore, due to COVID restrictions and the lockdown situation in Lesotho, many of the patients who require the medication will not receive them due to delays. In lines 67 to 68, the delegates of Lesotho proposed to construct pickup facilities in order to distribute the medication. However, the price for these facilities and the maintenance cost was not covered in the expenses listed below and are otherwise not mentioned. Finally, the COVID-related problems make this very unfeasible as even with proper care, so many people with HIV in a concentrated area make this plan very likely to become a super spreader for this country. The children with undeveloped immune systems who are also going to be tested have a higher chance of severe symptoms of COVID occurring because of their undeveloped immune systems. Thus, the resolution would have a higher chance of success if these concerns were handled. I hope the delegates of Lesotho take into consideration the problems of the resolution and take immediate action. I yield my time.
And with that, the delegate has yielded 1 second to the chair. We'll now move into our pro-intent speech. Delegate.
My fellow delegates, HIV is a hidden issue here in America, but in countries like Lesotho, it is the leading cause of death. In many sub-Saharan African countries, HIV-infected pregnant women have to live without aid, knowing that they and their child are at extreme risk. This being said, Lesotho has been making major progress in the fight against HIV, but that progress has since been hindered due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic has caused mother-to-child transmission rates to increase, and many women have not been able to receive any sort of HIV treatment for months due to delivery disruptions. It is important that we pass this resolution to continue the progress that has so far been made. This resolution provides an efficient, low-cost solution to a problem of extreme importance, which will not only benefit Lesotho, but also other sub-Saharan African countries through strengthening the health and well-being of pregnant women and their families. Along with benefiting pregnant women and their children, this solution will also be impacting the third UN Sustainable Development Goal of good health and well-being. As we aim to achieve these goals by 2030, we need to take more action. 2030 is less than 10 years away, and although we have come a long way, there is still much ahead. This resolution takes a step forward to a better world. I urge passage and yield the remainder of my time.
And with that, the delegate has urged passage and yield the remainder of her time to the chair. We will now move into our first round of con debate. Do we have any con speakers on the floor? Ginther.
Ginther, United States, the patrons yield to a possible series of questions.
They do so yield.
May I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate?
That is your right. Please specify a delegate.
Venezuela. Says this, is the 6-month interruption of supply mentioned earlier up? Has that time elapsed?
Yeah, they had an interruption because they had a lockdown for 4 months.
So that's over now?
Yes.
So how many tests in total will each woman take by the end of their pregnancy?
2.
Okay. And how many women does each package cover? How many tests are included in each package?
Tests will not be included in the packages. They will need to come to the testing centers.
Okay.
That they'd be tested 3 times.
And will this have any changes to abortion rates? Will people who are planning on abortion still have to take the HIV test?
No, this will not affect the abortion rates.
And
Sorry,
why?
patrons, time for this round has elapsed. We will now move into our first round of pro debate. Do we have any pro speakers on the floor? Wise.
Wise, DPRK, may I address the floor?
That is your right.
May I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate?
That is also your right. Please specify a delegate.
Adarsh, Ecuador. Article 25 of the United Nations 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights states that everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate for the health and well-being of himself and of his family, including food, clothing, housing, and medical care and necessary social services. My fellow delegates, I urge support of this resolution, and I urge the passage of it because it would provide the universal medication that is necessary to maintain that standard of health that every person deserves. Thank you. I yield the remainder of my
Darsh, Ecuador, do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so, yield, and you have 27 seconds.
How long would this go on, as you state a yearly sum in line 76?
So that yearly sum, yes, that is how much we're proposing, and we would have a check-in from 5 years to see where our statistics are and how many people are getting medication, and if they are, if the COVID setbacks are being recovered from.
Great. And what has Lesotho done to help the HIV rate in the past?
They actually did have a PMTCT package called the minimum PMTC package back in 2007, and it was successful. However, they weren't able to continue because they lacked funding, and they even had a package, a PMTCT plan as well in 2003.
I'm sorry, patron, time for this round has elapsed. We will now move into our second round of con debate. Do we have any con speakers on the floor? Stover.
Stover, Mexico, do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so, yield.
And may I yield my time to a fellow delegate?
That is your right. Please specify delegate.
In India. So as previously mentioned, you say you would have a check-in every 5 years. So the yearly sum you would want $9 million each year. Is that correct?
Yes.
And after that 5-year check-in, would those stop if rates have gone down?
They wouldn't necessarily be cut off, but if we see that they are approaching their targeted statistics, then we would reduce the medication packages and just continue working towards making sure that everyone has medication and everyone's being tested, but it wouldn't just be abruptly.
We will make improvements based on the statistics.
And then in the paragraph that starts in line 33, you previously stated that you have already sent out these packages. How much would each of these cost, and have they actually helped the rates before?
Where did we state that?
You previously stated that in 2007 they had minimal PMTCT packages. So would these be similar, and have those helped bring down the HIV rates?
Yes, they had. Mothers were able to get on medication. It's just that they didn't have enough funding to continue.
Matter of funding.
How much do the packages cost then?
$80. There's $80.
Patrons, time for this round has elapsed. We will now move into our second and final round of pro debate. Do we have any pro speakers on the floor? Wyrich.
Wyrich, Chile. Do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions, and may I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate?
They do so, yield, and that is your right. Please specify a delegate.
Wu, United Kingdom. Can you all talk more about how this has been implemented in other countries and any empirical evidence that shows that, I know you mentioned the 2007 packages. Can you talk a little bit more about how those have been efficient in the past?
Yes, so we have countries such as Oh, well, so the PMTC packages in 2003-2007, it increased the number of people, the women that were given treatment, but its progress was a little bit slower than expected, so we weren't able to continue. And it also helped decrease adult HIV incidence by 29%. And countries like Zimbabwe, they had extremely high HIV prevalence rates, but they were able to decrease their prevalence by 20%. And the new infections among young children had fallen by 2/3 since 2010.
I yield the remainder of my time.
Will United Kingdom, do the delegates yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so yield, and you have 14 seconds.
Are you aware that in the United States and other developed countries, aggressive efforts to treat HIV-positive pregnant women with antiretroviral therapy have decreased maternal-to-child transmission of HIV from 20% to less than 2%?
Yes, countries such as the United States and in Europe have, and through these packages, the mother-child transmission rates have been decreased under 1%. And
I'm sorry, patrons, time for this round has elapsed. We will now move into our third and final round of con debate. Do we have any con speakers on the floor? Brown.
Brown, UAE, do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so yield.
And may I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate?
That is your right. Please specify a delegate.
Venezuela. In line 77 and 78, you're talking about the 9 million as well as the 7 million. Why, what is the provide treatment with the 9 million if the packages are the treatment?
the 9 million is to treat and test pregnant women, and the 7.5 million is the COVID relief packages.
Okay. Thank you.
Pan in Venezuela, do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so. Yield. You have 33 seconds.
So you say that women are going to have to go back multiple times. How do you guarantee that they're actually going to come back to get their shots, especially with that stigma around HIV?
It will be highly recommended that they come back for their own health, but it will not be strictly enforced, and we won't have any punishment.
Okay. I yield the remainder of my time.
And with that, the delegate has yielded 7 seconds to the chair. We will now move into 1 minute and 35 seconds of the patron summation. Patrons, you may begin when ready.
First off, we'd like to announce that 90% of mothers don't all know their status, and they're not all in education. That was for the whole population. As of right now, only 66% of HIV-infected pregnant women are receiving treatment. And since they're not on lockdown right now, the medication distribution would be possible. And their lockdown was a total of 4 months, which is and that's over 60 days. And that's people have been reporting not having medication with their lockdowns for more than 60 days. And the facilities wouldn't be costing that much money because we would be implementing them in already established government buildings, such as churches or schools. And we wouldn't need to pay staff it wouldn't cost a lot of money to pay the staff and their wages because it would be an automatic system. So the COVID has disrupted the 90-90-90 plan. The UN AIDS has even released a statement saying that we won't be able to meet our goals for this year, and that's why the COVID relief program of our resolution would be really needed. And yeah.
HIV and AIDS have been one of the top leading causes of death in Lesotho for the past 10 years. Efforts towards a mother-to-child transmission strategy have been slow, and many other developing countries have also struggled to implement PMTCT due to geographical and financial issues. However, because our plan will be to administer medication before 6 months of age, research has proven there to be rapid growth recovery. By preventing mother-to-child transmission, the future population of Lesotho would be saved, giving them the opportunity to live a full life. Our resolution will be keeping Lesotho on track towards reducing HIV infections and help HIV patients to receive their medications timely, thus preventing unnecessary deaths due to the pandemic. Thank you, and we yield the remainder of our time to the chair.
And with that, the patron has yielded 3 seconds to the chair. We will now move into voting procedure. If you would like to vote, please vote on the participants window using for a positive vote, we want this resolution to pass, and the no red X for a no, we don't want this resolution to pass. So it looks like, oh, just kidding. I was gonna say it looked like our vote counts were evening out, but if they don't change in 3 seconds. Okay, so with a vote of 35 for and 10 against, this resolution does pass. And now I'm going to hand it off to Hadia to chair the next resolution.
Thank you, Jackson. We will now move on to Resolution F-9, a resolution to end the mistreatment of Ecuadorian prisoners. Patrons, you have 2 minutes for your introduction. Please begin when ready.
I think we can agree that everyone makes mistakes from time to time, and many of the prisoners in Ecuadorian prisons think the same. However, unlike many of us, they are not offered a second chance after their mistake. Whether it be a less serious drug charge or a traffic violation, Ecuador's prisons are filled with people that are filled with remorse for their crime. However, often the punishments for crimes that we would consider petty are grand. For example, one could get a 5-year sentence for going 15 miles over the speed limit, and once they are in prison for this sentence, the nightmare does not stop. Prisoners are faced with abuse, little food and water, and almost no resources. Prison conditions in Ecuador are some of the worst in the world, currently exceeding the maximum capacity in prisons by 33%. One might think that these prisoners get relief after their sentence, but this torment continues on, as many ex-cons struggle greatly with getting a job. And all of this may have started with a simple mistake. So how does one solve a multifaceted problem such as the Ecuadorian prison system? A solution has to get to the core. The basic necessities must be funded. Food, water, and resources must be given to prisoners. Next, one must offer a solution for prisoners getting out of prison with no opportunities and nowhere to go, but back to prison by starting a basic educational program, along with establishing connections to nearby rehab centers for drug and alcohol addiction. An educational program would give cons a chance to learn basic, marketable skills, and such programs as the United Nations Developmental Program and the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime could aid with establishing jobs, where a con could be hired after they serve their sentence. Lastly, laws such as the Nelson Mandela laws must be enacted for both clear organization of prisons and more authority on police officers abusing their power and hurting inmates. The Ecuadorian prison system needs a lot of work, and it starts with establishing rehab programs within prisons to make sure that prisoners can have a future after their jail time. I hereby yield the remainder of my time to the summation.
And with that, the patron has yielded 10 seconds to their summation. We will now move into 2 minutes of technical questions. Are there any technical questions on the floor? Bolivia.
Richards, Bolivia, you're requesting $40.3 million. How long do you anticipate this money lasting before it runs out?
We're anticipating about 8-9 years, and by that point, the law should be established and there should be more resources coming into the prisons. Along with that, prison population should be much lower, so that money will,
yeah. Chile.
What budget are you taking the $40 million from? Just like the UN yearly budget?
Yes, the UN yearly
budget. Bolivia.
Soriano, Bolivia. The 40.3 million USD, would that go for teacher salaries as well, or would teachers be volunteers?
Oh, it would go towards teacher salaries as well, yes.
United States.
Again, through the United States, how many Ecuadorians died in prison within the last year?
The number is about 60 to 75 people, but a lot more have faced abuse, and I can go more into that, but yes.
Syria.
Kumar, Syria, how much money have you allocated towards rehabilitation facilities or programs?
Okay, so we have about 25 million docked for rehabilitation programs, along with salaries and setting up the education program. Yeah.
Thank you.
India.
In Dilipudi, India, have any other countries implemented similar rehabilitation programs?
Oh, yes. The Nordic countries, Sweden, Finland, all of them have really, really great success rates with rehabilitation programs and therefore have a much lower recidivism rate.
And lastly, Portugal.
Teacher Portugal, do you know what percentage of your inmates are in for minor infractions like speed limit
Yes, I do. It's
infractions?
64.5%.
I am so sorry, delegates, but time for technical questions has elapsed. We do have both a con and a pro intense speech already assigned. Do I have a motion on the floor to recognize those?
Motion.
Please rise and state your motion.
Kumar Surya, motion to allow the intent speakers to give their speech.
That motion is in order. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
And with that, we will now move into our con intent speaker first. Delegate, please begin when ready.
Fellow delegates, the issue of Ecuador's impending government corruption is well known and a matter that has been frequently contested. In line 35 of the resolution, they are requesting for $40.3 million to be donated to the corrupt government to institute a criminal rehabilitation program. While this is a noble cause, I do not understand how donating money to an already corrupt government will lessen the effect of corruption. According to the official UN statistics, a concerning $2.6 trillion is lost annually due to government corruption. A large portion of this funding is donated by the United Nations to corrupt governments such as Ecuador's. However, due to the corruption within these governments, it rarely ever changes the status of the nation's living conditions, further undermining the UN's efforts to end poverty and corruption. This misuse of funding significantly impacts those living in poverty and unfortunately continues to deprive them of basic needs for survival, while those in power only continue to grow and further embed corruption within their nation. Bearing this in mind, I do not see how Ecuador's ambassadors can ensure that the funding they are requesting will actually be put towards the discussed sectors. It is also important to consider Ecuador's request to have the United Nations Development Program assist in creating a more fair and just prison system, as stated in line 43 of their resolution. The UN does not have the power to alter a nation's criminal justice system. It only has the power to help resolve international disputes. Seeing as that issue does not actively involve other nations, it is not legally within the rights of the UN to change the criminal justice system. That is an internal problem that must be resolved through bills passed within their own government, not the UN. I will, however, acknowledge that government corruption has begun to slowly decrease in light of President Moreno's election. However, there is still a significant amount of corruption on the federal level. With that in mind, I strongly believe that we should currently focus our efforts for supporting President Moreno in implementing these changes and revisit the requests listed in this resolution at a later date. Please do not misinterpret what I'm saying. I genuinely believe that this is an important issue and one that must be addressed. But until Ecuador can confidently assure us that the corruption within their government has decreased, there is no guarantee that the $40.3 million that they are requesting will actually be put towards improving the quality of.
I'm so sorry, delegate, but time for your intent speech has elapsed. We will now move into our pro intent speaker. Patron, you have 2 minutes. Please begin when ready.
Good afternoon, delegates. Ecuador, like many other countries across the globe, has countless problems regarding its prisons. These problems include, but are not limited to, prisons exceeding the maximum capacity of inmates, reports of torture, inadequate food supply, inadequate resources, and prisoners' trouble reintegrating into society after their release. These problems are direct violations of human rights. On September 4th, 2017, a human rights organization reported allegations of torture amongst inmates at the Turi Prison Center in Ecuador. A doctor examined one of the prisoners and confirmed the claims. Such instances like these are prominent across Ecuador and cannot be tolerated anymore. This resolution addresses the issues of human rights violations in prisons, and it also provides ways of mitigating the prison population without endangering citizens. According to this resolution, this will be done by initiating rehabilitation programs, which have proven to be far more effective than prison time, as well as providing education for some prisoners. This resolution combats two birds and one stone. It helps the inmates and it helps the overflow of prisoners to decrease. This is why this resolution is so important. It not only improves conditions for Ecuadorian prisoners, but it also sets a global precedent for the humane treatment of prisoners. Thus, I urge passage of this resolution. Thank you.
And with that, the patron has yielded the remainder of her time to the chair and urged passage of this resolution. We will now move into our first con round of debate. Do I have a con speaker on the floor? Belarus.
Hall, Belarus, do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so yield.
And may I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate?
That is your right. Please select a delegate.
Sri Lanka. So you mentioned in your intro the Nelson Mandela laws. Can you elaborate on what those are?
Absolutely. So the Nelson Mandela laws, these laws mandate proper conditions in prisons and detail how a prison should be managed. Going into details about how long an inmate can be in solitary confinement and the banning of torture in jails, so they validate the life of a prisoner and set out clear-cut guidelines for how a prisoner can be treated. If Ecuador adopted these laws, it would set a new standard for prisons and the police officers that abuse and mistreat the prisoners in it. And the UN would just suggest this to Ecuador. It would not enforce this in action, but this suggestion would be taken by Ecuador.
Okay, and who will be overseeing this? As you mentioned in your resolution that the police officers are a cause of a lot of violence, so who's going to be like making sure that this doesn't hurt the prisoners?
Yes, absolutely. So the United Nations Developmental Program would be the main one consulting on this. So it would go directly to the federal, like the government and the
I am so sorry, delegates, but time for this con round has elapsed. We will now move into our first pro round. Do I have a pro speaker on the floor? Peru.
Snyder, Peru, do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so yield.
And may I yield my time to a fellow delegate?
That is your right. Please specify a delegate.
Abstin, Brazil. Do inmates have access to proper hygiene and basic sanitation?
They do not.
And how many inmates are imprisoned for basic nonviolent offenses?
So our statistic right now is about 64.5, and that chalks up to about 25 million of Ecuadorian inmates.
And what are the rates of released inmates returning to these prisons?
Oh, it's about 72%, but that changes after years. So after 3 years, it's a lower rate than after 9 years. After 9 years, it's about 81%.
I yield the remainder of my time.
Abstin, Brazil, do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so yield. You have 15 seconds.
Are there other countries with prisons that exceed capacity in the United Nations? And if so, which countries?
Yes, much of South America, Brazil, Colombia, Peru, a lot of these prisons have high, an overcapacity and are about like 122.
I am so sorry, delegates, but time for this pro round has elapsed. We will now move into our second con round. Do I have a con speaker on the floor? Sri Lanka.
Tuliata, Sri Lanka, do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions, and may I yield my time to a fellow delegate?
They do so yield, and please specify a delegate.
Stover. So it's clear that this issue needs to be addressed immediately, but will the prisoners remain in the prisons for now, even though they're over capacity?
Yes, but eventually that number will change. As we see recidivism rates lowering, that means that capacity will lower and eventually will be around the 100% mark. And that's what we're anticipating for about 8-9 years, and that would be when the funding would end.
So how long will the rehabilitation take for like prisoners with lesser crimes?
We're assuming that it'd be about 2.5 years to learn basic marketable skills, kind of like a technical college, but less advanced. It would be just business skills, communication skills that would help them in the real world.
And then, so you said that like a lot of the people that are in there are for lesser offenses. So why can you not just internally resolve or reform the justice system so people have lesser sentences?
So that's a really good question. Rehabilitation.
I am so sorry, delegates, but time for this con round has elapsed. Excuse me. Before we move on to our next pro round, I see we have a motion. So, Canada, will you please unmute yourself and state your motion?
McNulty, Canada motion to extend pro-con debate by 1 round.
I am not sure if that motion is in order. Could someone higher up than me please let me know if I am able to make that motion in order?
Hadia, that motion is in order for 1 round and 1 round only.
Okay. That motion is in order. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
And because
Second.
Thank you. And because it's in order, we're just going to go ahead and do it for the sake of time. So we will now move on to our second pro round. Do I have a pro speaker on the floor? Turkey.
Poi, Turkey. May I address the floor and may I yield my time to a fellow delegate?
Those are both your rights. Please specify a delegate.
Wu, United Kingdom. My fellow delegates, one of the most inhumane actions you can do to a person is solitary confinement. As mentioned in the Patron's resolution in lines 20 through 21, inmates are prohibited from seeing their families. This is a cruel action enforced by the Ecuadorian government, and I urge passage of this resolution. I yield my time to the fellow delegate.
Wu, United Kingdom, does the delegate yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so yield. You have about 30 seconds.
The con-intent speaker mentioned a lot about corruption. However, would you agree that within the past few years, Ecuador has become much less corrupt, seeing as the corruption perception index has a parabolic curve?
Yes, absolutely. So President Lenin Moreno has made many steps towards stopping the corruption in Ecuador, and Ecuadorian citizenry has been vocal about corruption. International organizations have monitored and worked with President Lenin Moreno to stop corruption, and the IRI, the International Republican Institute, has worked to fight against Republic corruption by starting the VCA. It's the vulnerability to corruption approach.
I apologize, delegate, but time for this round has elapsed. We will now move into our third con round. Do I have a con speaker on the floor? Bangladesh.
Jacob, Bangladesh. Do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so yield.
May I yield my time to a fellow delegate?
That is your right. Please specify a delegate.
Penin, Venezuela. So you say you want to give food and water to these prisoners. So does that mean there's going to be, how's that going to affect the crime rate? You're going to see a higher crime rate because there's not going to be as much abuse or incentive to not do these crimes because of the fear of torture?
So resources just basically ensures that these prisoners get what they need and are not malnutritioned in these prisons. The rehabilitation program actually works to fix the justice system along with the Nelson Mandela laws, but the resources are just basically to help the prisoners and give them better living conditions.
Yes, but with this torture, don't you think that would be sort of like an incentive for people to not do crime? So I'm not asking like what you're going to do with the stuff. I'm asking how's that going to affect the country? Are we going to see higher or lower crime rates?
For one thing, we will see lower crime rates. Recidivism and it is an important part of crime rates. And recidivism, when a prisoner cannot find opportunities outside of prison, they just get back into prison. It's a documented effect. Along with that, torture should never be excused in a prison.
I am so sorry, delegate, but time for this round has elapsed. We will now move into our next pro round. Do I have a pro speaker on the floor? Canada.
McNulty, Canada, do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so yield.
And may I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate?
That is your right. Please specify a delegate.
Snyder, Peru. Does the UN have the responsibility and ability to deal with issues of human rights?
Yes, they do.
And abuse and violations of prisoners are occurring and violating human rights, correct?
Yes.
Can you define recidivism again?
Oh, recidivism is when a prisoner goes back to prison after a previous stay in prison.
And what percentage of your country is incarcerated?
It's about 4 to 5%.
So in other countries, how have similar programs affected the incarceration rate?
Okay, I have a good example. Norway has established a really strong rehabilitation program that has reduced their recidivism rates to 20%, which is the lowest in the world. It makes prisoners be able to go back into the workforce, having job abilities and being much more likely to be hired.
And if a prisoner were to abuse these privileges or be unresponsive to education, what punishment or repercussions would they face?
I am so sorry, Delegate, but as you were asking the question, time for this round elapsed. We will now move into our final con speaker. Do I have a con speaker on the floor? United States.
Stand through United States. May I address the floor?
That is your right, please. Yes.
Yeah, may I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate?
That is also your right. Please specify, Delegate.
Siampa, Estonia. So I'm afraid that the problem here is more of an internal issue, and that the prisoners know that they're going to go to prison and get abused and tortured already. People are repeatedly committing the crimes right now. They're repeatedly going and robbing. They're repeatedly doing drugs. They're repeatedly murdering, and they know what the consequences are. So when we take away some of the consequences, yes, those consequences are inhumane and they should be fixed, but we need to address why are they repeatedly committing the crimes. And number one, the laws are some of the biggest issues. Those laws need to be readdressed and fixed. So if the lower crimes are the issue, and that's the people who have committed the lower crimes should not be in jail, the laws need to be fixed. I'm very worried about how many teachers will have to be trained, how many teachers will be in prison, and how many teachers will be at risk. I yield the remainder of my time to the delegate.
Well, I'm sorry, but as you're yielding your time elapsed for this round. We will now move into 1 minute and 10 seconds of the patron summation. Patrons, please begin when you are ready.
All in all, the Ecuadorian prison system is greatly flawed and needs a great deal of work to start giving their prisoners a comprehensive experience that includes education one could use in the job market. Many cons struggle to get jobs, as many places are strict in not hiring past inmates. This is what the United Nations could aid with, along with giving funding for the thousands of prisoners without enough food or resources to be supported. I do understand that corruption is an issue, but if it's handled better, if it's handled within the government and with the United Nations, the Ecuador will do all it can to not interfere with it and make sure that the funding goes towards the rehabilitation program and the resources. And the crime rate in Ecuador is not much higher than any other Latin American countries. It's that the prisoners are being they have a longer prison stay than is mandated for these crimes that they have done. Thank you, and I yield the remainder of my time to the chair.
And with that, the patron has yielded 10 seconds to the chair. We will now move into voting procedures. So please click yes in the participants bar in favor of it, and no if you are against the passage of this resolution. Unless the numbers change in the next 3 seconds. With a vote of 30 in favor, 20 opposed, this resolution hereby passage. Congratulations. I will now turn over to Nelson.
Thank you, Hadia. We will now be moving into our third resolution of the day, the resolution, let me just make sure I have this correct. Resolution F-4 from Bolivia, a resolution to improve the enforcement of child labor laws in Bolivia and South America, and the creation of the United Nations Child Labor Surveillance Committee for Latin America and the Caribbean. Will those delegates please unmute to be recognized?
Hopefully next year, I can go back to school. Words of lament, words of a nation slowly agonizing, words that no child should ever have to consider saying. These words are those of Edwin Choquevilla, a 14-year-old youth who, unlike 93.183% of the children in this country who are enrolled in school, works in the Cerro Rico mine near the city of Potosí, Bolivia, With only $5 a day, Edwin, his mother, and his 3 siblings must scramble and ration the limited goods available to them in order to survive. Living in tight quarters and next to explosives and gasoline, the family even lacks the basic necessities of water and food, not to mention modern needs such as electricity and heating systems. All his siblings walk barefoot, and the only pair of shoes Edwin has is a pair of working boots he uses in the mines. Despite all this, Edwin's puerile aspirations continue identifying him as a child. When he grows up, he wants to be a professional soccer player.
Edwin's story relates to the thousands of children in Bolivia who have suffered from child labor. In almost every case, there are at least 3 common denominators: lack of education, poverty, and government corruption and negligence. Thus, the vicious cycle of abuse continues indefinitely until someone takes the bold decision to put an end to this madness. Until then, thousands of more children will bear the burden of centuries of their country's mistakes and corruption and racial discrimination against the indigenous people of the Americas.
Our nation believes that it is the duty of all men to aid one another in their shortcomings and to present a united front against a common adversary. The plan our country proposes to the General Assembly is the creation of an international organism that will monitor the growth and decay of child labor in all countries located on the American continent and the Caribbean in order to eradicate significantly the threat of child labor by the year 2030. This group, being composed of delegates from said countries, shall be in charge of the recording, informing, and advising of local and national governments on the development of child labor, as well as providing resources for those suffering from child labor. I yield the remainder of our time to the summation.
With that, the patron has yielded 3 seconds to her summation. We will now move into technical questions. Do we have any technical questions? Let's go to Wu.
Wu, United Kingdom. What is the range of corruption perception indexes of South American countries?
We do not have that information, but there is government corruption in Bolivia for sure.
And also to add on to that, we have an index of around 34, just to add on.
Let's move on to Kramer.
Are there any child labor laws in place in
My
Bolivia?
apologies, delegate. You did not state your name and your name and country, so you were out of order. Hall.
Paul, Belarus. How many kids exactly are in the working?
So 15.2% children, which is approximately around 256,000 children, ages 7 to 14 are currently in the workforce in Bolivia.
Stover.
Over Mexico, about what percentage of labor in all of Latin America is child labor?
We do not currently have that information.
However, it is big, especially in underdeveloped countries.
Alfaro Blancas.
Alfaro Blancas, Nepal. What is, if this information is known, what is the total population of the native indigenous people of Bolivia?
Are you asking for the entire population?
Yes.
Okay, that would be 11,709,026 as of 2020.
We have time for one more question, and that's going to be coming from Stalhut.
Stalhut, Japan. Sorry. What is the largest institution that currently uses child labor in Bolivia?
That would most likely be agriculture, as that is one of the biggest.
My apologies, delegate, but time for this round of technical questions has elapsed. We will now entertain a motion from the floor to recognize any and all intent speakers. Do we have that motion
from the floor?
Please rise and state your motion. Do we have any other motion? Please rise and state your motion.
Enter intent speeches.
That is in order. We do have one pro intent speaker, but we will recognize a con intent speaker from the floor if people who would like to give a con intent speech will raise their hands. McNulty, you have 2 minutes for a con intent speech.
May I begin? Or?
You must state your name and country before you begin.
Sorry. McNulty, Canada. Fellow delegates, while I believe that child labor is a major global issue, more specific solutions than those provided are needed. Also, simply urging a government can have impact, but when corruption runs deep, it's likely that little momentum will occur. Also, it is the duty of a government to function in a just manner, but conducting an internal investigation might not be effective with little oversight from international bodies to hold them accountable. I also agree that child labor is horrible, but many families keep their heads above water and avoid starvation because of this income. There needs to be provisions for the loss of income that would occur. I do not believe children should be working, but I believe that the families should not have to suffer because children are able to live lives the way they should be. Sadly, much of the world does rely on this, and there are many consequences to child labor. But if child labor were to end, the impact would be felt in a positive and apparently also a negative way. So we would need to account for the loss of agriculture and the loss of income for families. I understand this task force could do that, but there needs to be specific delineations in the resolution that require this to be done. Education infrastructure also needs to be reinforced, and I believe that a task force through UNICEF or one that is international and has regional divisions might be better than just one organization between a few nations. I yield the remainder of my time to the chair.
With that, the delegate has yielded 33 seconds to the chair. We will move into our only pro-intent speaker on the resolution who has signed up previously. Intent speaker, you have the floor.
Snyder Peru. My fellow delegates, at 8 a.m., many children across the world will awaken beginning to get dressed, showering, or eating breakfast. Some will wait for a bus. Others will walk amongst their friends while waiting for more to be dropped off to school. In these schools, they will gossip, study, joke around, and run through the hallways chasing after one another. They will complain about a teacher or an inconvenient workload, while others will lean on their companions for support, some starting romances they only see in movies and taking pictures to show their children one day. This reality is unobtainable for too many adolescents in Bolivia. These adolescents will starve and bend in fields of crops in the sunny hills for hours as their bodies become stunted in growth over time. They will be threatened, bribed, blackmailed, and raped. Their brown skin will turn red with sunburn, blood, and tension from the basket strapped to them. They will daydream about our lunches and uniforms, soccer or playgrounds, but they cannot linger in their wonder. We must act for our children of the sun, the innocent childhoods gripped, strained, and torn away by poverty and child labor. No one deserves this indentured servitude they suffer at the hands of governments, abusers, and managers who put economics over ethics. They will not go home to do practice work, but to lights that don't work and siblings that need to be fed. No proms, Friday night lights, or play dates, but hot days turning into freezing nights. The only warmth will await for them in a field instead of the blasting heaters of our classrooms. We must use our own experiences to make sure all can share in an equal opportunity of education. I greatly advocate for the passing of this bill to relieve the children from the shackles of forced child labor clamped onto them. We must walk in the broken-soled shoes and bare feet of these child workers to understand and take action in the words, "Enough is enough." Only then can we claim the title of having humanity. I yield my time to the chair.
With that, the delegate has yielded 16 seconds to the chair, and we'll move into our first con round. Do we have any con speakers? Abstin.
Abstin, Brazil. Do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so yield.
May I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate?
That is your right.
India. Do working children ever go to school?
About 1 in 100 children ages 7 to 14 are not going to school but working, but about 14% of children who are working are also, about 14% of the population are working while attending school.
Does Bolivia have a public school system?
Yes, they have a K through 12 public school system.
How would that system be able to handle a rapid increase in students during the COVID-19 pandemic?
Considering that only about 1 in 100 children are not attending, ages 7 to 14 are not attending school, it wouldn't be that rapid of an increase. And we would also like to mention, we're not that upset that children are working. 14 is not that low of an age. It's like that in many developed countries, but we're more worried about the dangerous situations that these children are being put into. Working in a retail store, a fast food restaurant is not the exact same thing as working in a mine. And also there has been direct links to the child labor, to the child sex trade in Bolivia. And those are the kind of things that we're trying to stop.
I yield my time.
Chintulapudi, India.
My apologies, patrons, but time for this round of con debate has elapsed, and we will now move in to our first round of pro debate. Do we have any pro speakers? Schaefer.
Schaefer Gabon, do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so yield.
And afterwards, may I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate?
That is your right.
Snyder. Can you further describe the working conditions that these children are put into every day?
So the working conditions, imagine going to work under the blazing sun, having to walk in marshes because some of the crops are planted in marshes, especially rice crops, having to manipulate dangerous equipment such as machetes, such as machines that aren't the safest and were not intended, were not created for child use, and having to do that. I mean, imagine trying to learn how to use it, and all of a sudden, just for making the slightest mistake, that could cost you a leg or an arm or your life even. And also, even if that wasn't the case, they're also using pesticides that are toxic to human consumption and to human exposure. So these are the kinds of dangerous and hazardous activities that these children are unfortunately doing.
Would you agree that this is linked to the child mortality rate in your country?
It is slightly.
My apologies, delegates, but time for this round of pro debate has elapsed. Remember to put your hands down before con debate if you were intending to be a pro speaker, but we will now move into our second round of con debate. Do we have any con speakers? Zahid. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Zahid Turkey, do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so yield.
And may I
Yield.
Thank you. Yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate.
That is your right. Please select a delegate.
All
right.
So in line 50, you mentioned national advertising. Which mediums do you intend to utilize for this?
All of them, to be honest. We're talking about using those $500,000 to go to have communities from the United Nations go into the indigenous communities and advertise that way. We're talking about ads, as we have here in the United States. We're talking about posters everywhere, wherever there's transportation by roads, by phone, all the ways necessary so that the indigenous people and the entire population of Bolivia as well may know the problems that child labor causes, and also know that there is an escape route to that.
A significant population of Bolivia is rural. How do you intend to reach these people?
As I previously stated, we're going to be using these tiny groups, or maybe not tiny groups, but groups of people from the United Nations to go out and tell these people that there is more benefit in studying than in working.
My apologies, delegate, but time for this round of con debate has elapsed, and we will now move into our second and final round of pro debate. Do we have any pro speakers?
Motion.
Please rise and state your motion.
Chintulapudi, India. Motion to extend pro-con debate by 1 round.
CCE staff, can you remind me if that motion is in order? I believe that it has to precede the final round of pro debate. Is it in order? I know it is in order in terms of time, but I just want to make sure it's in order in terms of parliamentary procedure. Yes, that motion is in order. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seeing as that motion is in order, I don't feel the need to vote on that with a yes or no vote. So we will now move into our second to last round of pro debate. Do we have any pro speakers? Which it seems that we do. Wandam.
Wandam, Egypt. Do the delegates yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so yield.
And may I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate?
That is your right.
Woolwich, Chile. Will this plan affect any other countries?
Yes. And the original intent, I want to take this opportunity to clarify a doubt that we had during one of the con speeches, is that this would be open to everyone on the American continent. So we're talking as far north as Canada and as far south as Argentina and Chile. So anyone who joins is going to have the benefits of being able to participate in being able to bring more practical solutions to child labor.
Thank you. I yield my time.
We reached Chile. May I address the floor?
That is your right. My apologies. You have 20 seconds.
Being a delegate of Chile, this resolution would obviously affect my country greatly. In Chile, 94,000 children are exploited doing hard labor in mines and agriculture instead of going to school or getting to experience the freedom of being a child. With the help of the UN, all countries in Latin America can come together, finding solutions to fight this common adversary, with the UN providing aid, collaboration, and support to not only Bolivia, but to all of Latin America and
My
to the whole
apologies,
world.
delegate, but time for this round of pro debate has elapsed, and we will now move into our third and second to last round of con debate. Do we have any con speakers? Fry.
Fry, Philippines, do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so yield.
And may I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate?
That is also your right.
United Kingdom. So how is studying going to seem more beneficial than working when 40% of your population is already below the poverty line?
I would like to mention again, we're not so worried that they're working. We are worried that they're working and not going to school, but we're more worried about the dangerous situations that they're being put into. They're being put in dangerous situations in agricultures, in mines, and also, like I said earlier, there's a direct link to the sex trade, and we need help regulating these things. So we're more worried about the dangerous situations that these kids are being put into, not the fact that they're working in the first place.
Yes, but they have to be in the dangerous conditions to even survive when they're already on the brink of starvation. It's like, what outweighs it? The risk of being able to live or to die from starvation?
We understand these risks, and we can assure you that further action will be taken, especially now that we will be having a council and a committee to help us on that. However, I would also like to emphasize that if we want to maintain a stagnant level of child labor, we can just leave things as are and let things continue as they have been for decades. However, if we want to push
My apologies, delegates, but time for this round of con debate has elapsed. We will now move into our third and final round of pro debate. Do we have any pro speakers on the floor? Field. Field, you have been recognized to speak.
Sorry, I was letting my dog out. Field, Angola, do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so
May I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate?
That is also your right.
Let's go with the delegate from AUE. Do you have a minimum wage? Will you put in a minimum wage for the child labor?
We cannot assure you that we will put in a minimum wage, starting with the fact that we don't want a minimum wage for child labor, period, and we don't want child labor, period. However, I can assure you that we will look for the betterment, at least, of those who are suffering from child labor, so that when they are liberated from these conditions, that they may at least have some sort of recompense.
I yield the remainder of my time.
With that, the delegate has yielded 20 seconds to his fellow delegate from the United Arab Emirates.
Lova, UAE, do the delegates yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so yield.
Do you plan to implement any programs that will financially assist the families that rely on child labor?
Yes, this is part of the strategy. However, that part has not been released yet, since we are still waiting for the committee to convene. But once it convenes, there will be a suggestion, and once a suggestion is ratified by the committee, then it will be put in place, as well as its ratification through...
My apologies, delegate, but time for this round of pro debate has elapsed, and we will move into our fourth and final round of con debate. Do we have any con speakers? Poi.
Poi, Turkey, may I address the floor and may I yield my time to a fellow delegate?
Both are your right. Please select a delegate.
Fry, Philippines. As mentioned earlier in the resolution, you stated that you were going to have groups of UN members encourage people living in rural areas to have children go to school. You mentioned again that you aren't concerned with children going to school. Fellow delegates, this is a direct contradictory, and I urge low ranking of this resolution and yield my time to the fellow delegate.
Pride Philippines, may I address the floor?
That is your right. Your fellow delegate has yielded you 40 seconds.
Okay, so first off, considering we don't even have a rough estimate for what like the price of your plan would be aside from the $500,000 to set up the committee, I don't really think it's logical to even consider giving your country money because you are ranked nearly 130 out of 180 countries for corruption, and most of this money will not even be going towards the children and help them. And 30% of your population is employed in agriculture, which will probably include a fair amount of child laborers, but they're supporting their families, and that's 15% of your GDP. And you're already $2.5 billion in debt, and I don't understand how your economy will be able to hold up against all of this.
My apologies, delegate, but time for this final round of con debate has elapsed, and we will now move into 1 minute and 3 seconds of the patron summation. Patrons, you have the floor.
How many more children will suffer from this dreadful malice? Only we can determine that. Only by putting aside our differences, whatever they may be, will we obtain the inevitable triumph of justice and freedom in the New World.
Then, and only then, will America's victorious cry ring in every hill and every plain, from the north to the south, from Spanish to English, from the Atlantic to the Pacific. Only then will we fulfill the dreams of our fathers, who out the long and old chains of Europe's empires built a shrine dedicated to life, liberty, and prosperity for all peoples.
Brothers, education is the only weapon that we can use to eliminate this malice. As a continent, as mothers and fathers, sisters and brothers, friends and family, as inhabitants of the Americas, let us pursue our adversary until he is unable to stand. Anay yanapay niki manta. My people says to you, thank you for your support. We yield the remainder of our time to the chair.
With that, the patrons have yielded roughly 20 seconds to the chair, and we will now move into voting procedure. Please click the yes button to vote in favor of the resolution, and please click the no button to vote against. I'll give you several seconds to vote. All right, seeing as the votes are beginning to stabilize from the participants, I will give you 5 more seconds to get those last votes coming in. All right, I'm actually going to give 5 more seconds due to the close nature of the vote. As it seems that the votes have stabilized, this resolution does pass 24 in favor, or 25 now in favor, 21 opposed, and 0 abstentions. Delegates, congratulations. We will now, I'll now hand chairing duties off to Solomon, and yes, we will move into the next resolution.
Cool. Congratulations to all the resolutions that have passed so far. Our next resolution is G11 Mongolia, and it is a resolution to address the rapid desertification of Mongolia. So patrons, you may begin your 2-minute introduction whenever you're ready.
Mongolia is currently suffering through a rapid desertification crisis. Desertification causes a reduction of food and water and threatens the lives of thousands of people. As much as 96% of the country could transform into a desert if nothing is done to combat this. To improve the desertification crisis, Mongolia would like to expand a pre-existing UN Development Fund for 4 more years to improve land management and decrease desertification, as the last development fund was successful. By expanding this development fund project, we hope to influence our neighboring countries like Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan to also join this development fund or to create more funding to combat desertification and climate change. This development fund would further help stop desertification and improve the environment and well-being of Mongolia. I yield my time to the summation.
With that, she has yielded 1 minute and 13 seconds to her summation. We will now move on to 2 minutes of technical questions. Are there any technical questions on the floor? We'll start with Field.
Field, Angola. Can you define desertification?
Desertification is when the land turns into like a dry land and there's less moisture in the soil.
It occurs because dry land ecosystems, which cover 1/3 of the world's land area, are extremely vulnerable to exploitation.
Poi or Poye from Turkey.
Poi, Turkey, how much of your land has turned to desert?
Close to 90%.
Gil.
Gil Belize, what percent of the GDP does agriculture make up?
11% of agriculture.
Doherty, I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong.
Doherty, Uruguay, what percentage of your population is part of the agricultural workforce?
We don't have that exact statistic at the moment, but it is a major part of our economy.
Feaster?
Feaster, Portugal. How much was this for your development fund in the past? Like how much money?
It was around 2.5 million for all 4 years of the project.
Salute from Japan. I'm sorry if I pronounced your last name wrong.
It's okay. Stallhead Japan, what are we looking at for budget?
2.5 million for all 4 years.
And Ardosh from Ecuador.
Darsh, Ecuador. How much arable land does Mongolia have?
Can you repeat the question?
How much arable land does Mongolia have?
I don't think we have that statistic, sorry.
And Stover from Mexico.
What is the land area of Mongolia?
What are you asking?
I'm sorry, delegates, but time for technical questions has elapsed. We will now move on to intent speakers, but we actually don't have any intent speakers at all. So is there anyone willing to do a con-intent speech or a pro-intent speech? If you are, please raise your hand. This is for con. If you would like to do a con-intent speech for this resolution, please raise your hand. I'll choose Panin from Venezuela. And is there anyone who would like to do a pro-intent speech for this resolution? Snyder from Peru. So I will now ask for a motion to recognize the intent speakers. Oh my. Please rise and state your motion.
McNulty, Canada, motion to recognize any and all intent speakers.
That motion is in order. Is there a second? Cool. Seeing that there is a second, we will now move on to our con-intent speech. You have 2 minutes on.
My fellow delegates, I am not in support of this resolution. Not only, my main issue with it is that there are 168 countries in the world currently suffering from huge issues with the certification. This resolution proposes to add money to a previous plan that has ended. However, it only mentions countries surrounding its own, as well as the fact that the only thing it's asking for is for more funding, no new ideas on how to help the certification, which is also a primary issue to me. And if we look at even very, very recent news from the UN, as close as from yesterday, they have been discussing new plans on the certification, funding the certification. It's been a huge focus there. So just because one fund has ended, it doesn't mean there aren't new plans constantly being developed. To me, this resolution is simply useless. It only addresses a few countries rather than what the UN is currently doing, which is attempting to help the certification in all countries that suffer from it. I yield the remainder of my time.
With that, she has yielded 44 seconds to the chair. And now we'll move to our pro-intent speech. But before you speak, Snyder, have you spoken for a resolution already, or are you going to speak for one in the future?
I spoke for Bolivia.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize you spoke for one. So we'll have to choose another speaker so everyone can speak. So is there someone interested in doing a pro speech? Thank you for volunteering, though, Snyder. I appreciate it. Okay. I think I'm about to pronounce your last name wrong again. From Japan, salute?
It's I'm fine with whatever. Still at Japan. Fellow delegates, today we are discussing a constant issue due to the overuse of agricultural land. Yes, this is only affecting Central Asia, but this will also, unlike other resolutions, this is actually a plan that's already has a determined foundation, planning, and it already has the necessary budget, and which is actually considerably lower than the other budgets we've seen. Unlike billions of dollars, this is a smaller scale thing with an already established, well-stable foundation. And I urge the passing of this bill. I yield my time.
With that, he has yielded 1 minute and 23 seconds to the chair. We'll now move on to our first round of debate, which is a con round. Is there a con speaker on the floor? Kumar from Syria.
Kumar, Syria. May I address the floor?
That is your right.
And may I yield the remainder of my time to a
That is
fellow
also
delegate?
your right. Please specify a delegate.
Feaster, Portugal. Fellow delegates, although the United Nations is responsible for encouraging and enforcing Development Goal 13, I do not think that this resolution furthers the goal for one main reason. This is a positive feedback loop. Let me explain. If the United Nations reinforces arable land and reduces the amount of desertification in Mongolia, it increases the capability of the agricultural industry. However, the resolution points out that livestock and overgrazing represents the tenet of the desertification problem. If we were to increase the amount of land for such problem, we would only exacerbate the problem, and the probability of the Mongolian delegation coming back in another 30 years asking for more funding just makes the resolution unfeasible. And additionally, as another delegate had further stated, there is already another resolution that has been passed for such. The Green Climate Fund, as of November 2020, has already invested $23 million towards a new 7-year program. Additionally, I would like to note that Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan have a desertification rate of 84% and 76% respectively.
I'm sorry to interrupt you while you're speaking, but time for this round has elapsed. We'll now move on to our first pro round. Is there a pro speaker on the floor? Chinta Lapudi from India.
Chindalapudi, India. May I address the floor?
That is your right.
And may I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate?
That is also your right. Please specify a delegate.
Bolivia. So I've heard a lot of points about like a lot of people that went against it, but I feel the need to point out that desertification is, yes, this resolution addresses certain countries, but it's something that can be expanded to other countries in the future if proven to be successful. And desertification is a major issue that impacts the globe, and in about 10 to 20 years, it's going to be irreversible. So I think we should be doing everything necessary to promote the mitigation of desertification, because it leads to less farming capabilities, which in turn leads to hunger. And hunger leads to socioeconomic differences, which leads to internal strife. And that negatively impacts the economy and the society. And desertification also leads to the migration of individuals who are looking for more land and more food for themselves, which also negatively impacts the economy. So as you can see, desertification just kind of leads to the downward spiral of a nation.
I'm sorry to interrupt you while you're speaking. I'm sorry about that. We will now move on to our second con round. Is there a con speaker on the floor? Gaither from Brazil.
Gaither, Brazil. Do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so yield.
And may I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate?
That is your right. Please specify a delegate.
Feaster, Portugal. So, will this plan combat the issues you discussed in line 12, as such livestock and overgrazing increase?
Yes.
So how will that affect your agricultural industry and those jobs?
So
when the land gets back to its normal state of being, able to use as farmland and for livestock and such, that will increase the agricultural production overall of the country, which is already a major part of our economy and GDP. So that land cannot be used at like the current moment in time. So that land is not being used because it's unusable. It's like there's no way to use it.
So the people that are
I'm sorry, delegate, sorry to interrupt, but time for this round has elapsed. We'll now move on to our second and final pro round. Are there any pro speakers on the floor? Teles Orellana from Bolivia. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your last name.
No problem. Tejas Orellana, Bolivia. Do the patrons yield a possible series of questions?
They do so yield.
And may I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate?
And that is your right. Please specify a delegate.
Adarsh, Ecuador. So you mentioned the 4-year funding plan from the United Nations. Can you list a few of the major accomplishments that this funding has been able to accomplish in your country?
Yes, so it improved the land structural support. It combated soil erosion, it sustained agriculture, and it boosted our economy in the time that it was active.
I yield the time to my fellow delegate.
Irish, Ecuador, did the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
You do so yield, and you have 34 seconds.
Great. In 4 years, what are the changes that you're planning to see?
We're hoping for this to be successful and that it will hopefully combat desertification and like it did like the last 4 years, and that hopefully we can get other countries like Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan with this kind of the same environment at us to also join this plan if it is successful. And we also are not opposed for any other countries that also are having trouble with desertification to also go through this plan.
And can you detail how desertification impacts?
I'm sorry, delegates. Sorry to interrupt, but time for this round has elapsed. We will now move on to our third and final con round. Are there any con speakers on the floor? Angelova from UAE.
Angelova, UAE, do the delegates yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so yield.
Could you elaborate on what specific strategies you will be using to combat desertification?
So the major points we want to address within our plan to rehabilitate the land is we want to increase land management, put into place ground supports, combat soil erosion, sustain our agriculture, and the plan will also include staffing for the project.
And if your economy primarily relies on agriculture, then how do you plan to revive the economy in light of the land's inability to withstand these agricultural practices?
So I think what you're asking is, in the meantime, like, can you elaborate on what you mean by that?
I'm sorry, like, in the meantime, while you were working on reviving like the actual land, what do you plan to instigate for economical purposes, I suppose?
So the land we are going to work with is not land that is Given that the previous attempts to combat desertification in Mongolia were successful in lessening the issue at hand, our continuation and renewal of this fund and project will prove to be beneficial to our country's ecosystem, and through its success, become a model to other countries facing similar problems. I also want to address something that someone said in the Conpro speeches, which is that although there is new methods coming out, ours is a lot less expensive and already proven to be successful. Therefore, I urge passage and yield the remainder of our time.
With that, they have yielded 1 minute and 46 seconds to the chair. We'll now move on to voting procedure. So you guys know what to do by now. So go to participants and press the green check if you would like this resolution to pass, or press no if you would not. I'll give you guys 10 seconds to do so. With a vote of 30 for and 15 against, this resolution does pass. Congratulations. And I believe I am passing the baton to Jackson for our next resolution.
Yes. Will the patrons of resolution G-13, a resolution to provide education to children in the Republic of Chad, please get ready to present. Patrons, you'll have 2 minutes for your introduction and you may begin when ready.
Without a doubt, education is the most important part of a child's life.
It shapes a child's character, career, and essentially the rest of their lives. Now imagine having no education past the high school level. Well, simple cause and effect. Bad education in turn leads to a bad life for you and your kin. Just how that strong roots a tree cannot stand. It seems unreal, but for the majority of kids in Chad, it's the reality. Only 2% of children in Chad move on to secondary school, or what we would call high school. Due to this, Chad relies on manual labor and agricultural exports to support their weak economy. A lack of education gives rise to a multitude of other problems, such as a shortage of medically qualified doctors in Chad, along with teachers that are unable to provide that higher level of education that Chad needs so badly.
Chad has one of the lowest literacy rates in the world because of this lack of educated teachers with a higher education. Most Chadian children grow up to be subsistence farmers or primary school teachers, unable to do anything more than hardly support their family because they do not have the level of education. The country of Chad has turned to the United Nations concerning this problem in the past as well, with the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child and the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of a Child, both occurring in 1990. Chad began to solve the minimal education and rights of child in their country.
Delegates, the country of Chad urges you, as delegates of the UN, as caretakers of the world, as the future of civilization, don't make this mistake. Help provide Chadian citizens with the future they desperately need. And you may think, oh, this dude's just reading from a script or something. Well, I'm not. I don't even have this memorized. I'm reading this from my heart. Do you know why? Because I've been here. My parents, they were born in the worst part of the world. I've seen the upsides and the downs of the entire world. But my parents were given a chance. They were given education and now run like the top 10% of the world. We lived in a hut. You know those huts you make in Minecraft? Yeah, we live in one of those. But everything changed. And now we have to change that for these Chadian children. For decades, Chad has relied on agricultural means to support its economy.
I'm sorry, patron, time for your introduction has elapsed. We will now move into 2 minutes of technical questions. Do we have any technical questions on the floor? Jacob.
Jacob, Bangladesh, how many schools are you planning on making with these funding?
We're planning on implementing and improving 12 school districts in the areas we have listed, the Mayo-Kibi Est region and the Mayo-Kibi West region.
Jarrett.
G11 Mongolia, what is Chad's poverty rate due to poor education?
Considering 2% of our workforce, or 98% of our workforce is Cameroonians and foreign labor, we've had multiple economic crises, such as the 2012 economic crisis and the 2018 economic crisis, promoting poverty among Chadian citizens.
Stallhut.
Stallhut, Japan. Will this help citizens? Never mind, my question's already been answered. I yield my time.
Snyder.
Do you have the dropout rates of people in secondary
I'm
school?
sorry, delegate, you're out of order. Please state your name and country first.
Snyder, Peru. Do you have the dropout rates of people entering secondary school in Chad?
Yes, I do. Every 167 kids out of 1,000 kids end up dropping out of secondary school.
Thank you.
Finway.
Sorry, I forgot to change it. Field Angola. How many secondary schools are currently in your country?
There's currently 7. There are only one, as said in the resolution, the SIGE, the statistics system for the Chad education system, has a 2-year delay, but the last recorded was 783 schools in the city of N'Djamena, which is the capital of Chad.
McNulty.
McNulty, Canada. So for which language does the literacy rate provided in line 3 apply?
French and Arabic. It's a combination of both because that's what the education system runs through in Chad.
I'm sorry, delegates, time for this round has elapsed. Now we will move into intent speeches, but before we take a motion for that, we only have a pro intent speech scheduled. So anyone on the floor want to take a con intent speech, please raise your hand. And just remember, you can't sign up for this unless if you've already done one. Woo, are you volunteering for that con intent speech?
I'm sorry, I was just putting my hand down. I had already done one, so I can't do another one, correct?
Okay, great. Do we have any volunteers for the con intent speech? Please raise your hand. Seeing as we don't have any volunteers, we will be entertaining motions for our pro intent speech.
Motion.
I see a motion on the floor. Please rise and state your motion.
Kumar Surya, motion to allow the any and all intent speeches to be presented.
That motion is in order. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second.
All right. Will our pro intent speech please get ready to present?
Absent Brazil. Imagine never attending school, working in the fields instead. Imagine the effects of never learning how to read in your adult life. That is the reality for children in Chad, and that is their future. Education is vital to the success of individuals and whole communities, as the economy relies on understanding common knowledge. Hygiene and employment also stem from education or a lack thereof. Fellow delegates, the UN and Chad have been working to solve this problem for decades. I wholeheartedly believe that this solution, implementing phase 3 to improve education centers and helping with the coronavirus precautions, is the right one. The expenses to the UN is relatively low, and the programs used will improve many aspects of people's lives. I encourage the passing of this resolution for the children of Chad and other African nations. I yield my time to the patron summation.
And with that, the patron has yielded her time. We will now move into con pro debate. Do we have any con speakers on the floor? Chiampa.
Chiampa, Estonia, do the delegates yield a possible series of questions?
They do so yield.
And may I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate?
That is your right. Please specify, delegate.
Jacob, what effect has COVID had on the schools in Chad?
There was actually no school for 3 months out of the school year due to there being absolutely zero COVID precautions in schools. But with the implementation of that grant money, everybody's been able to go back to school in the city of N'Djamena, which is our capital city.
And why is this United Nations issue? Isn't this more about Chad improving its own education system?
No, not at all. This would actually affect Cameroon, the CAR, and Sudan, considering we have 781,900 foreign refugees from Cameroon, the Central African Republic, and Sudan. So this would affect the education system of a lot of Western African countries, not just Chad.
Thank you. I yield my time.
Jacob, Bangladesh, may I address the floor?
That is your right. You have 25 seconds.
Although $70,000 may seem like a lot to safety precautions, the United States and multiple also developed countries have given more money into safety precautions. However, this has not had a big effect since a lot of people are still being infected with a lot of these safety precautions in place. So in order to combat COVID, it would be better for schools to stay closed in Chad rather than being open and becoming a super spreader in Chad and increasing the number of COVID cases in Chad itself, which would be more safer, which in turn will be more safer for the people themselves. I yield my time to the chair.
And with that, the patron has yielded 1 second to the chair. We'll now move into our first round of pro debate. Do we have any pro speakers on the floor? Kimbo?
Kimbo Satome and Principe, may I address the floor and yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate?
That is your right, and please specify a delegate.
Kumar Surya. Fellow delegates, as someone who values the importance of education, I want to stress the extent to which Chad's youth is suffering. With one of the worst literacy rates of any nation, and with most teachers being unqualified, Chad is stuck in a cycle of poor education. And just to address a previous delegate's claim, I don't think COVID-19 should be a factor in this. If Chad is having a poor education system, then it will always be that way. If COVID is solved, then they'll still have a bad education system. And so I urge the passage of this bill and yield my time.
Kumar, Syria, may I, do the delegates yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so, yield, and you have 31 seconds.
Delegates, are you aware of Boko Haram's iron grip on Chad?
Yes, we are. And as from 2010 onwards, there's been multiple solutions presented by the UN to change this, but they haven't been.
Wouldn't you encourage that education reduces the amount of people who have to resort to terrorism?
Completely. This is why we're trying to implement this plan to attack multiple different problems.
It is clear that this is a good resolution. Thank you. I yield the remainder of my time to the chair.
And with that, the delegate has yielded 4 seconds to the chair. We will now move into our second round of con debate. Do we have any con speakers on the floor?
Motion.
Please rise and state your motion.
Chintalapudi, India. Motion to extend pro-con debate by 1 round.
Seeing as we didn't have a full round of intent speeches, that motion is in order. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second.
All right. So we will extend con-pro debate by 1 round, and we will now move into our second round of con debate. Any con speakers on the floor? Ginther.
Ginther, United States. The patrons yield to a possible series of questions.
They do so, yield.
May I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate.
That is your right. Please specify a delegate.
Will. Is the number mentioned in line 45, the 30 million, is that dollars?
Yes, that's dollars. I'm sorry, I forgot to specify. That's dollars from the World Bank specifically.
And can you justify and explain
Yes,
that?
I completely can. So we're simply lengthening past partnerships. So the UNHCR partnership with the Education Above All Foundation, the budget for that to cover protection, housing, food was specifically $25,802,746. And the budget specifically for the Chad Education Sector Reform Project Phase 2, which we're simply lengthening for the exact same amount of time it was before, was $5,068,797. So if you add those two numbers up, that's how we came to the number in the resolution, because whenever we're asking for money, you want to be feasible. We don't want to take too much. We only need enough to solve the problems within our country.
Thank you. I yield my time.
Will United Kingdom, may I address the floor?
That is your right. You have 15 seconds.
Delegates, this resolution is not sustainable in any way. They are draining the United Nations budget instead of using something very effective, such as foreign direct investment when it comes to education. Other developing countries have used foreign direct investment when it comes to education, and it has been far more effective than just simply asking for an allotted amount of money. Thus, I urge failure of this resolution. Thank you.
And with that, the delegate has urged failure and yielded the remainder of her time to the chair. We will now move into our second round of pro debate. Do we have any pro speakers on the floor? Zahid.
Zahid, Turkey, do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so, yield.
And may I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate?
That is your right. Please specify a delegate.
McNulty, Canada. So in lines, I believe it is 31 to 32, you state that you wish to improve school infrastructure. Can you elaborate on what this will entail?
Yes, specifically school buildings in the Mayo-Kibi S region and the Mayo-Kibi US region, there's a lack of those. And that was what those previous plans covered in Njamene, the building of buildings and the education of teachers through UNHCR's partnership with the Education above all foundations. So that's the specific plan.
I yield the remainder of my time.
McNulty, Canada, may I address the floor?
That is your right. You have 37 seconds.
My fellow delegates, a quality education is a sustainable development goal of the United Nations. Therefore, it is the organization's responsibility to further this goal in every country. Also, if one is educated, they're less likely to be in poverty because they're able to get a higher paying job, which also means they can afford healthcare to have better health and well-being. This eliminates hunger. This may also mean that they have better water and sanitation because they can afford a better home. This also improves economy, energy, infrastructure. Nearly all of the sustainable development goals, which are goals of the UN, can be improved by improving education within Chad. I yield the remainder of my time to the chair.
And with that, the delegate has yielded her time to the chair. We will now move into our third round of con debate. Do we have any con speakers on the floor? Stallhood.
Stallhood, Japan, may I address the floor?
That is your right.
May I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate?
That is also your right. Please specify delegate.
Ginther, United States. This is to reflect on an earlier delegate's statement of the Boko Haram. The same reason why the Chad government doesn't put infrastructure in these two specific regions is the same reason of Boko Haram. They are concentrated highly, and I mean iron grips of Salafi extremism in northeastern Nigeria, along with southwestern Chad, with an iron grip. If we attempt to build these infrastructures as planned, they'll likely become the schoolgirls and schoolboys might become the next Chogoboku 2014 kidnapping. We need to also establish a series of security parameters and provisions so we can continue provisions and fighting against the Salafist extremism before we get another 213 schoolgirls kidnapped and hundreds dead because of this, including suicide bombings, car bombings, and all further. I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate.
And I'm sorry, delegates, but time for this round has elapsed as he was yielding time. We will now move into our third and final round of pro debate. Do we have any pro speakers on the floor? Chintalapudi.
Chintalapudi, India, may I address the floor?
That is your right.
And may I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate?
That is also your right. Please specify a delegate.
Mexico. Fellow delegates, Chad has one of the lowest GDPs in the entire world and remains a developing country. So they need this increase in education to kind of pull themselves out of an economic downfall and also to support the refugees that were displaced by the Darfur conflict and Sudan and the Central African Republic. And not having access to this education is a violation of the Declaration of the Rights of the Child. And also providing education past primary school will encourage lower birth rates, foster economic and technological growth, and help achieve gender equality along with social development and many other things. And the money that they're requesting is entirely fiscally feasible and has already been done and proven to be successful. So all in all, I highly encourage passage of this resolution. Thank you. I yield my time.
Stover, Mexico, to the patrons, those are a possible series of questions.
They do so yield, and just so you know, you have not.
Has literacy rates increased as this project has been put into place?
Yes, 7% increase in the literacy rate among women and a 2% increase in the literacy rate among men.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, delegates, time for this round has elapsed. We will now move into our fourth and final round of con debate. Do we have any con speakers on the floor? Woo.
Woo, United Kingdom, may I address the floor?
That is your right.
May I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate?
That is also your right. Please specify.
Stolhood, Japan. I would just like to elaborate on what I said previously about foreign direct investment. A lot of these delegates are urging passage of this resolution because this provides education for a lot of students in Chad. However, I do not agree whatsoever with the amount of money they're asking and how they're asking for it. They are asking for it from the United Nations, and foreign direct investment has proven to be far more effective. You can look at countries like Bangladesh and India who have used this method of foreign direct investment to promote education in their countries, and it is not only sustainable, but it is also economically feasible, and it will last for a very long time, as opposed to what they're asking right now, just simply from funds from the United Nations. And additionally, this is a very country-specific resolution, and it doesn't address education issues in many countries. Around 53% of children across the globe do not have access to proper education, and I think that they're being extremely selfish by only implementing this resolution in Chad, while other children in many other countries do not have.
I'm sorry, Delegate, time for this round has elapsed. We will now move into exactly 1 minute of the patron summation. Patrons, you may begin when ready.
As you all can see, Chad and its youth is in a desperate need for your help. Without these funds and the help of the UN, the youth of Chad will not be able to build the strong roots required to succeed in building a good life for themselves. By improving the education through the plans spoken of in our resolution, many other African countries can also adapt this model to improve education and our economy, along with the medical industry, that will greatly be improved.
To address wrongful claims, I'm not exactly sure what they meant by it's not multiple countries in scope when this would clearly affect Sudan, which is heavily affected by the Darfur conflict. This would completely change their education system. So it would extremely help the Central African Republic, and it would extremely help Cameroon. So I'm not sure why it wouldn't be a UN problem when UN problems want to be multiple in scope. And to address foreign funding, Bangladesh does not have the same problems that Chad does. Cameroon tried to have foreign funding to improve their education system, and it horribly failed, as shown by their education system. Chad and Bangladesh are two different problems. These plans have had success with these budgets, and they're completely feasible. With the re-implementation of these plans, Chad can greatly improve our education system, and by doing that, improve the education of Cameroon's children.
I'm sorry, Patron. Time for this round, for your summation has elapsed. We'll now move into voting procedure. Remember, use the green check for yes, I want this resolution to pass, or the red X for no, I do not want this resolution to pass. I'll give y'all a few seconds. It looks like our votes have steadied. Oh, just kidding. Since the vote count hasn't changed in a few seconds, with a vote of 41 for and 12 against, this resolution does pass. And now I'm going to hand it back to Hadia for our final resolution.
Thank you, Jackson. Will the patrons of Resolution F-6, resolution to set forth plans to combat the emerging policy issue of environmentally persistent pharmaceutical pollutants, please prepare to present. Patrons, you have 2 minutes for your introduction. Please begin when ready.
Environmentally persistent pharmaceutical pollutants sounds like a complex topic, but seeing as EPPPs were nominated as an emergency policy issue and seen as a threat to the Sustainable Development Goals, the issue is much closer to home than you might believe. As antibiotics and pharmaceuticals enter the environment, research has begun to unveil the horrors that EPPPs cause for both the wildlife and for us, including negatively affecting the reproductive skills of aquatic life, the cognitive abilities of animals, and even what we call a population crash, in which a species reaches the brink of extinction due to exposure to an antibiotic. And EPPPs heavily contribute to the issue of antimicrobial resistance, creating what a lot of people have deemed superbugs. And if action is not taken soon, these superbugs will kill 10 million people per year, starting in 2050.
The issues of EPPPs have often been overlooked, under-researched, and underfunded, and that is what our resolution is going to change. We are hoping to call a conference in which action will be decided on, but we want to incorporate research into sustainable chemistry, which is the concept that chemistry can be sustainable for the environment rather than harmful. Our resolution includes having a partnership formed between the International Sustainable Chemistry Collaborate Center and the European Technology Platform for Sustainable Chemistry with the UNEP to address and research EPPPs.
We are also calling upon the Inter-Organization Program for the Sound Management of Chemicals to continue their research into the adverse effects of EPPs and calling for specific goals to be set, focusing on providing resources as well as detection technology to developing countries that have more pharmaceuticals in their water streams. I urge passage of this resolution and yield the remainder of my time to summation.
And with that, the patron has yielded 22 seconds to her summation. We will now move into 2 minutes of technical questions. Are there any technical questions on the floor? Bolivia.
Yes, Orellana, Bolivia. How long does it take for these EPPs to break down in nature?
So the reason why they're called EPPPs is that they essentially do not. So they're so resistant that it's going to take lifetimes for them to fully break down, and it's to the point where it's affecting our environment and us.
Let's see. Are there any more technical? There we go. Brazil.
Gaither, Brazil. What are the major pharmaceutical pollutants?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me just pull that up for you. So we have imipenem, ciprofloxacin, fluoroconazole, caspofungin, daptomycin, methicillin, vancomycin, penicillin, amphotericin B, and a whole lot more.
Egypt.
Wanton, Egypt. Does your plan have a budget or like?
So our plan is calling a conference in which to set these goals, and so the budget and the allocated money will be decided then.
Gabon.
Schaefer, Gabon. Do you have a statistic for how much worldwide pollutants have raised in the past few years?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now, 500 to 600 drugs have been tested, and they found adverse effects in all of them, and they found these across the entire world.
Canada.
McNulty, Canada. Does New Zealand rely on agriculture for a significant part of its economy?
So that's not necessarily relevant to our resolution because this is a worldwide kind of issue that we are currently addressing.
Chile. Sorry, I was muted. We're at Chile. Can you define an environmentally persistent pharmaceutical pollutant and like the difference from like a regular pollutant?
Yeah, absolutely. So regular pollutants can be biodegradable depending on the antibiotic, but environmentally persistent pharmaceutical pollutants
I'm so sorry, delegates, but time for technical questions has elapsed. We will now move into intent speakers. So there's only a pre-assigned pro-intent speech. Do I have anybody who hasn't spoken that would like to give a con-intent speech? Since I'm not seeing any volunteers, may I please have a motion to recognize our intent speaker?
Motion.
Please rise and state your motion.
Motion to recognize the intent speeches.
That motion is in order. Do I have a second?
Second.
We will now recognize our pro-intent speaker. Patron, you have 2 minutes. Please begin when ready.
Schaefer, Gabon. Delegates, pharmaceutical pollution is an issue not only plaguing one specific country, but rather the entire world. EPPPs are mainly found in waterways and oceans, not only affecting the health of our planet, but also the health of our citizens, as has been previously mentioned. Studies in India and surrounding countries have linked pharmaceutical pollution to the development of superbugs. The way that this happens is due to the high and diverse number of EPPPs in the water surrounding these countries and the fact that microbes living in that area are able to identify and build resistance to these drugs. Given our current world health situation and the way that it has negatively affected not only our world economy, but also our ability to meet the 2030 UN Sustainable Development Agenda, it is most beneficial to all member states to pass this resolution and push for a safer, cleaner future. I would like to stress that the rising stats in our global pharmaceutical pollutants negatively affects our environment and is also linked to wildlife decline. Delegates, we only have one planet Earth. Please protect it. I urge passage.
And with that, the patron has yielded the remainder of their time to the chair. We will now move into con-pro debate. Do I have my first con speaker? Estonia.
Tiampa, Estonia, do delegates yield a possible series of questions?
They do so yield.
May I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate?
That is your right. Please specify a delegate.
Gaither, Brazil. Now, these antibiotics undoubtedly save lives. Do you know that penicillin has saved 200 million lives since its creation?
Yeah, of course. We're not trying to get rid of the usage of antibiotics in any way. What we're doing is we're doing research into sustainable chemistry, which is antibiotics that are safe for the environment, and we're trying to do detection skills when it comes to antibiotics in the environment in order to stop them from entering the water supply, to filter said water supplies, and to stop them from entering the environment. We are not stopping the usage of antibiotics in any way, shape, or form.
And now, if the research into sustainable forms of these antibiotics, what if that is proven to be not as effective, sustainable chemistry, do you have a solution for that if sustainable is not as effective?
So at the moment, there has been a lot of research done that has shown that they can be really effective, and there is biodegradable antibiotics that are currently in place. So there is not a large reason as to why that it would not work. And even if it doesn't, the detection skills and the filtering skills that we will be implementing will stop the antibiotics from entering the environment anyways. The sustainable chemistry.
I'm so sorry, delegates, but time for this con round has elapsed. We will now move into our first pro round. Do I have a pro speaker on the floor? Portugal.
Please, Portugal. The delegates yield to a possible series of questions.
They do so yield.
May yield the remainder of my time to fellow delegate.
That is your right. Please specify a delegate.
Stover, Mexico. So, are there any particular countries, or what particular countries would you like to see at the conference that you think could have a greater impact on this as a solution?
Yeah, so well, the conference is going to be involved with the ICCM, which includes a lot of different countries, but our resolution specifically wants to focus on developing countries that have the highest issues with this, even though it's worldwide, and also countries that are heavily surrounded by water supply, such as Australia really needs a lot of help with this issue, and so does India. But in general, countries worldwide are all having a very widespread problem with this, which is why our resolution is addressing this globally.
Yeah, yield my time.
Over Mexico to the patron seals for a possible series of questions.
They do so yield. You have 20 seconds.
When did EPPP start to become common in the pharmaceutical industry?
So they're not a recent development necessarily. Antibiotics have been around for a very long time, and EPPPs were just an involvement of antibiotics as we continue to produce them. And more recently, they've become more of an issue. While previously they have existed, they're becoming more.
I'm so sorry, delegates, but time for this pro round has elapsed. We will now move into our second con round. Do I have a con speaker on the floor? Please remember to put your hands down if you were raised for pro. Let's go India.
Chintalapudi, India. Do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so yield.
And may I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate?
That is your right. Please specify a delegate.
Portugal. So this conference that you're talking about, is there like a specific timeline? Like when do you want this conference to take place?
So we're hoping that will be pretty immediate upon the passage of our resolution, that the conference will be immediately planned within the next year by the ICCM.
Okay. And the research that's being done by the inter-organization program, you're saying that you want them to continue doing research. Again, what's the timeline for this? How long do you want them to continue researching?
Yeah, so right now the conference that we're calling is going to be deciding a lot of the logistics of the plan in which to implement. But what we're saying is that they need more funding and more time in which to research the adverse effects, because they have a lot of research projects going on and we want priority for these adverse effects. And so this is going to be happening over the course of several years, because the research into antibiotics takes a very long time to process. And so it's going to be years long of projects, but just kind of seeing these adverse effects, because it's something that we need to address.
And what exactly are the specific?
I'm so sorry, delegates, but time for this round has elapsed. We will now move into our second and final pro round. Do I have a pro speaker on the floor? Nepal. That is your right.
The fellow delegates, it is critical to pass this resolution as it will allow for the environment in which many people live in to be safe and livable. This resolution also can be implemented in different countries around the world further improving a sustainable and safe with life is where there is a large presence of pollutants in the environment. Therefore, I urge low rankings of this bill and proceed past. I yield the remainder of my time to the chair.
And with that, the patron has yielded the remainder of her time to the chair, but I see we have a motion. So please rise and state your motion.
McNulty Canada motion to extend pro-con debate by 1 round.
I believe that motion is in order. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But I will hear, do I have a second?
Second.
For the sake of time, I'll just go ahead and say that that's in order. So we will now move into our next con round. Do I have a con speaker on the floor? UAE.
I apologize. My hand was raised for the pro. I did not mean to leave it up.
You're good. Peru.
Snyder, Peru, do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so yield.
And may I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate?
That is your right. Please specify a delegate.
Estonia. How is the pharmaceutical industry in New Zealand being held accountable for their damage to the environment?
Okay, so New Zealand has issues with antimicrobial resistance, but we are such a small country and our pharmaceutical industry is not the largest industry in New Zealand. So we do not have as many problems with this as certain other countries. And what we're trying to do is implement the same detection techniques that we're going to be doing globally.
Considering that New Zealand is a parliamentary democracy and their prime minister answers to the head of state of the British Isles, Queen Elizabeth, are you expecting the main country of the United Kingdom to be more helpful than any other country in this resolution?
I would like to once again address that this resolution is not just about New Zealand and it's not just about the British Isles. It's a global resolution that is going to be a global action plan that is going to be implemented by the UN and by the ICCM. This resolution is going to span all countries. It's not dependent on one country. It's not dependent on that in any way, shape, or form. A lot of countries have been asking help for this issue and have been seeking help and have not gotten it yet. Our resolution is answering that call for help.
I'm so sorry, delegates, but time for this round has elapsed. We'll move into our third and final pro round. Do I have a pro speaker on the floor? Ecuador.
Ecuador. May I address the floor?
That is your right.
And may I yield the remainder of my time to a fellow delegate?
That is also your right. Please specify a delegate.
McNulty, Canada. I urge low ranking of this bill as it is not only greatly detailed, it has clear-cut plans and could be applied worldwide. Climate change is a huge, complicated issue that affects the world, and this resolution suggests a plan that could take it on. EPPs cause severe long-term impacts on the health and resilience of organisms if these pollutants are released into the environment. People are using more and more pharmaceuticals and personal care products every year, creating more EPPs. There can be billions of dollars in environmental repercussions if not disposed on properly. And guess what? They're not. Along with this, EPPs are widely increasing throughout the world because the public is largely unaware, so it is imperative to start combating it now. Communication with the conference is imperative in this situation, and therefore, I strongly encourage passage of this bill. Thank you, and I yield my time.
McNulty, Canada, may I address the floor?
You may, but you have 8 seconds.
There are an estimated 23,000 deaths and 2 million infections a year caused by antibiotic-resistant superbugs, and this resolution could reduce that. I yield the remainder of my time to the chair.
As you were yielding, time elapsed. We will now move into our fourth and final con round. Do I have a con speaker on the floor? Brazil.
Gaither, Brazil, do the patrons yield to a possible series of questions?
They do so yield.
And may I yield my time, remaining time to a fellow delegate?
That is also your right. Please specify a delegate.
Snyder, Peru. So you mentioned in your resolution the UN Environment Program for Chemical Pollutants, and I was just wondering what could not only be addressed by that group that needs the help of other countries?
Can you repeat the question? I'm not sure what you're asking.
So this environmental group for chemical pollutants is already formed.
Yes.
What
in your resolution needs help from countries and cannot solely be addressed by this group?
Okay, so let me specify our resolution real quick. So the UNEP is a very broad organization that does address issues with chemical pollutants. And right now they have been called upon for help, and the ICCM has worked with them before trying to find solutions to this, but no direct action has been taken. No direct goals have been set, and the sustainability goals are still far off, and they have not taken action on this. Our resolution has set specific guidelines in which to call them to action. So it's not something that they have addressed, it's something that they've been trying to address, and our resolution is essentially just.
I apologize, delegates, but time for this round has elapsed. We will now move into a minute and 22 seconds of the patron summation. Patrons, please begin when ready.
Yeah, our resolution not only can solve the issue of antimicrobial resistance, which I will repeat, can kill 10 million people every single year once we hit 2050, and currently kills about 700,000 per year, but it can also help our environment. And what is happening right now is that a lot of animals can no longer reproduce because of the hormone imbalances that these antibiotics are causing. Our environment is dying because of these, and so are we. I urge passage of this resolution and yield the remainder of my time to the chair.
And with that, the patron has yielded the remainder of her time to the chair. We will now move into voting procedure. Please click yes if you are in favor and no if you are opposed. I will give you all about 15 seconds to do so. Seeing as the numbers have not changed in the past couple of seconds, with a vote of 41 in favor, 3 opposed, and no abstentions, this resolution hereby passes. Congratulations. I will now turn it over to the CCE staff.
Thank you. And congratulations again to all of our Showcase Resolution sponsors and delegates. Thank you all so much for being here and for participating in this wonderful round of debate. This is the first time we've been able to hold an event like this, but I can confidently say it will not be the last. Y'all have consistently impressed us before the conference with all the work that you put into it, at the conference with the level of debate and professionalism that you brought to all the procedures, and now at this showcase event. Thank you all so much for being such an involved and important part of Model UN this year. A couple of thank yous I'd like to give. First, to our chairs, thank you all for being here. It has been an absolute privilege to interact with you all for the last several years and to watch you all become the leaders that you now are. So a big virtual round of applause to our chairs. We could not do it without you. Thank you so much for being here today. I'd also like to thank our CCE staff, Susan and Elise. At the beginning of this year, we did not know in what form Model UN would be held, if at all. And it's the hard work of our staff, our board, our volunteers, and our officers that made this year's Model UN as successful as it was. So thank you all very much for making this possible. Also, I know that we have several Center for Civic Engagement board members on the call right now. You guys don't have to speak if you don't want to, but I did want to open the floor for a minute or two in case you all had anything that you'd like to add. So feel free to unmute yourselves, and thank you all for taking the time to be here today as well.
Tyler, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hey, just wanted to say thank you to all you guys for taking time out of your Saturday. My name is Brandon Oliver. I chair the board for CCE and am an alumni of the program. I was joking with Angela, or excuse me, with Susan, that it was 29 years ago that I sat in many of your shoes as Secretary General of the UN. You saw one of our other alumni, Devin McClendon, that was on the Skype earlier. He was president of the UN back in the fall of 1991. So it means a lot that you would work with Susan and Elise and Tyler to make this happen virtually. I can say that I don't feel that debate was hurt at all because of the virtual format, and just wanted to say again, thank you for taking time out of a Saturday and what has been a fairly crazy year, a very crazy senior year. So wish you all the best as you move forward.
Just have a couple more announcements then before we go. I am pleased to announce that the sponsorship opportunities that we gave out in the fall for Model UN were exceeded by the collective generosity of some of our delegates, our officers, people on our board, and supporters of the YMCA kind of across the state. Obviously, with everything that's been going on this year, it's still very important to us that this conference and this experience is open to all delegates across Tennessee and even in different states and other parts of the world, to make sure that nobody is turned away from a CCE conference because of their inability to pay. At the start of this season, we set out to raise sponsorships and financial aid for folks to attend Model UN. And I'm happy to announce that we met our sponsorship goal, and we were able to sponsor more than 75 delegates to attend Model UN. So thank you all so much, those of you who were involved in that effort. I'll say now that we're going to be launching a similar effort for the spring to make sure that everybody who wants to come to Youth in Government this spring is able to do so. If you or anyone you know is so moved to sponsor a student to come to Youth in Government this spring, I'm going to share a link in the chat in just a moment for you all to share with anybody in your life who might want to donate. It's a really, really wonderful opportunity, as you all know, and we want it to be open to everybody. So I'm going to put that link in the chat. And then we're also going to share a link to donate to our Plan Padrino project. If any of you all know about that, it's the partnership that we have with IBGA Colombia that we raise money for every year. It makes sure that students in Colombia can attend school and get the higher education that they need. We've partnered with them for almost 2 decades now, and that is another really great use of funds and resources if you have those. So I would encourage you to think about supporting one of those causes. And I know we have a couple of observers on the program or on this call that are not as familiar with the Model UN and Youth in Government program. So I will say that Center for Civic Engagement staff, as well as a couple of our chairs, are going to hang out for a little bit after we dismiss everybody in case you have any questions or would like to learn more about the program. I'll turn it quickly over to Susan and Elise if you guys have anything else to add before we dismiss.
Wait, Tyler?
Yeah.
Do you mind if I ask a question?
Sure.
So you said that the Plan Padrino project is an effort to get children. I got muted, my bad. Is an effort to get children in Colombia to go to schools. Is that correct?
Sure. So it's a program that's run by the YMCA and IBGA Colombia. Basically, public education is free in Colombia, but there are lots of associated costs that can make it a burden for families. Supplies, uniforms, transportation, childcare, all kinds of obstacles that kind of prevent people from taking advantage of those opportunities. So the Plan Padrino project, which Elise just put a link in the chat if you want to read more about that, is kind of an effort to bridge that gap and make sure that families in IBGA are able to take full advantage of the education system there. Every other year, we take a group down to Colombia to meet the families involved, and I can tell you that it's just a wonderful group of YMCA volunteers, staff people, and just some really amazing families that are impacted by this project. We are the largest single supporter of Plan Padrino families. Each year we sponsor between 40 and 50 of them, just based on the money that you all raise at Model UN. So Elise put a link in the chat if you'd like to read more about it, but it really is a wonderful program. And I would encourage you to do some additional research on it if that's something that interests you.
Yeah, we got to start one for Chad. For sure.
We'd love to expand our international partnerships. Elise, Susan, anything to add before we dismiss here?
Yes, Tyler. First, I look and see some of our alums that have gotten on this, and I really do appreciate y'all taking the time to come and listen to the delegates. And also to the delegates. I mean, as Tyler said, you know, when we started this back in April, a lot of other states that do this program didn't have an opportunity to go virtual. And it is because of you all, the delegates, who, first of all, y'all are amazing. I learned so much from listening to you guys and love listening to you all. You are definitely the bright spot in this year of 2020 when we have missed seeing you all so much. But you guys are going to change the world. I say it all the time that you guys are the reason that we have the best job in the world, that we get to work with delegates like you all, who give up their time to sit here and debate things that are important. You know, right before this, we had our global forum with the students in Colombia. And, you know, there are a lot of people who are going to sit here and say 2020 was bad for all these different reasons. But I just sit there and think, you know, we were able to pull off 5 virtual conferences with people like you. So thank you guys for trusting us to do it. And we look forward to seeing y'all at YIG in the spring.
Yep. Just one final thank you. You guys are amazing, and we are grateful for each and every one of you. Tyler, you want to wrap us up?
Sure. I think I'll turn it back over to one of our chairs if they'd like to entertain a final motion to adjourn for this season of Model UN. Solomon, why don't you take it?
I will now entertain a motion to adjourn. Do we have a motion?
Motion.
Motion.
Please rise and state your motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
That
Second
motion
that.
is in order. We'll now, is there a second?
Second.
We'll now vote with voice
Second.
acclamation. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? In the
Nay.
ears of the chairs, the ayes do have it. Have a good rest of the day, you guys, and congrats to everyone.
Chad on top. Have a nice
Thank
day.
you. Congratulations. We'll be on for a little bit longer in case you have questions or need anything from us. Have a wonderful Saturday and a wonderful rest of your holiday season.
Thank you.
I have a question real quick about the merchandise that guys. Can you guys hear? Am I lagging again?
No,
It's
you're
all
good.
We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. I just is there still merch left for Model UN for YIG?
Yes, there is a limited amount of merch still available on the CCE website. So if you go on there and click store, I think we're out of a couple sizes of shirt, but everything else should still be available.
Okay.
And we'll ship them to you.
Yeah, it gets shipped out next week.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job, officers.
Yes, thank you, chairs. Y'all were amazing and fabulous. I hope this was a reward for your hard work this year. That was some intense and exciting debate. So
And for a bunch of resolutions that all passed, it was very contentious, it seemed.
I know, I was questioning if some of them were going to pass.
Yep.